I'm Jonathan Goldstein, and you're listening to Wiretap on CBC Radio 1 and Sirius XM. Today's show, Small Change.
If I had the power to change one small thing about the world, people would be born with mute buttons right on their cheeks. So if they started going on and on about their cat or how damn great The Walking Dead is, you could just tenderly rub the side of their face and silence them. It would be a nice, polite way of getting them to shut up without having to be rude.
If I had the power to change one small thing about the world, I'd give humans the ability to switch gender at will. So you could go to a party as a man, dance as a woman, and depending on your options, leave as a man, with another man, or a woman.
I'd make it so that every 10 or 12 minutes, time would freeze, and the voice from the Dukes of Hazzard would make a folksy observation about what was going on around me. Sure looks like old man Tresham got himself into one heck of a jam this time.
If I had the power to change one thing, people would have tails.
There'd be a breed of bears the size of bunny rabbits.
There would be bubbles everywhere.
I would make language 100% musical so that life could be a song. It'd make getting fired a lot easier.
People would have more resilient egos. My husband, especially.
Everyone would have a beard. Women, too. And babies, tiny goatees.
Water fountains would serve wine.
I'd give people the ability to fly.
There would be no spiders or hummus.
Toasters would toast my toast perfectly every time.
If I had the power to change one small thing, I'd give people the ability to communicate with animals. Hello, little butterfly. What's it like to have a heart as light as air?
Darling monkey, could you go to school for me today?
Good day, Mr. Giraffe. How's my comb-over looking from up there?
If I could change one small thing about the world, I'd make it so days would have 25 hours, so you could spend the extra hour reading for fun. Or maybe just an extra hour to laze around and gaze up at the sky. That'd be nice too.
In Haruki Murakami's 1,000-plus page novel, 1Q84, there's a moment where one of the characters, Aomami, can't sleep. She walks out onto the balcony of her apartment building and, looking up at the night sky, sees not one, but 2 moons. She wipes the sleep from her eyes, looks again, and still 2 moons. The regular yellow moon, but right beside it, a smaller green one. Aomami has a friend staying over, and she sees her options this way. She can wake her friend up and have her take a look at the sky, at which point she'll either A, see only 1 moon, or B, see 2 moons and say, "Of course there are 2 moons. There have always been 2 moons." In either scenario, Aomami's friend will in effect be telling her she's insane. And so Aomami decides to just keep the fact she now sees 2 moons to herself, as though such a change is a small thing. 1 moon, 2 moons. How much do we really have to do with the moon or moons anyway? She'd just have to get used to the night sky's new look. When I read this scene, I felt like Aomami might be the strongest character ever created. Her ability to assimilate change is staggering, if not a little unsettling. For whatever the 2 moons might be, a small change or a big one, she accepts it and moves on. The rest of us, though, those of us not created by Murakami, tend to be a little more attached to the way things are, and so we resist even the most inevitable of changes.
My name's Stephen Gross, and I'm a practicing psychoanalyst, and I've written a book called The Examined Life.
Stephen, why is it that we resist change?
I think we do because change is loss. you can't have change without loss. You have to give up something for the new thing. One of the patients of mine said, I want to change, but not if it means changing. We can long for change, but we don't want to give up some of the things that we have, so it becomes impossible. There's a case history in my book called How a Fear of Loss Can Cause Us to Lose Everything.
Could you read it?
I'd be delighted to. When the first plane hit the North Tower of the World Trade Center, Marissa Panagrosso was on the 98th floor of the South Tower, talking to two of her co-workers. She felt the explosion as much as heard it. A blast of hot air hit her face, as if an oven door had just been opened. A wave of anxiety swept through the office. Marissa Panagrosso didn't pause to turn off her computer or even pick up her purse. She walked to the nearest emergency exit and left the building. The two women she was talking to, including the colleague who shared her cubicle, didn't leave. I remember leaving and she just didn't follow, Marissa said later in an interview on American National Public Radio. I saw her on the phone and she didn't want to leave. In fact, many of the people in Marissa Panagrosso's office ignored the fire alarm. Some of them went into a meeting. A friend of Marissa's, a woman named Tamitha Freeman, turned back after walking down several flights of stairs. Tamitha says, I have to go back for my baby pictures. And she never made it out. In Marissa Panagrosso's office, as in many other offices in the World Trade Center, people did not panic or rush to leave. That struck me as very odd, Marissa said. I said to my friend, why is everyone standing around? What struck Marissa Panagrosso as odd is in fact the rule. Research has shown when a fire alarm rings, people do not act immediately. They talk to each other, and they try to work out what's going on. They stand around. This should be obvious to anyone who has ever taken part in a fire drill. Instead of leaving a building, we wait. We wait for more clues, the smell of smoke, or advice from someone we trust. But there is also evidence that even with more information, many of us still won't make a move. In 1985, 56 people were killed when fire broke out in the stands of the Valley Parade football stadium in Bradford. A close examination of television footage later showed that fans did not react immediately and continued to watch both the fire and the game, failing to move towards the exit. Forensic reconstruction after a famous fire in the Beverly Hills Supper Club in Kentucky confirmed that many of the victims sought to pay before leaving, and so died in a queue. After 25 years as a psychoanalyst, I can say that this surprises me. We resist change. Committing ourselves to a small change, even one that is unmistakably in our best interest, is often more frightening than ignoring a dangerous situation. We are vehemently faithful to our own view of the world, our story. We want to know what new story we're stepping into before we exit the old one. We don't want an exit if we don't know exactly where it is going to take us, even, or perhaps especially, in an emergency. And this is so, I hasten to add, whether we are patients or psychoanalysts. I've thought of Marissa Panagrosso countless times since I first heard her story. I find myself imagining her in her office. I see her computer screen, the large windows. I smell the morning smells of perfume and coffee, and then the first crash. I see her walk to the emergency exit and leave. I see her colleagues standing around. Tamitha Freeman leaves, and then a few minutes later returns for her baby pictures. I see myself there in the South Tower, and I wonder, what would I have done? I want to believe that I would have left with Marissa Panagrosso, but I'm not so sure. I might have thought, the worst is over, or worried that it would feel ridiculous to return the next day only to discover that everyone else had continued working. Maybe someone has told me, hey, don't go. The plane hit the North Tower. The South Tower must be the safest place in New York. And I stay. We hesitate in the face of change because change is loss. But if we don't accept some loss, for Tamitha the loss of her baby photos, we can lose everything. Consider Mark A., a 34-year-old who has just discovered a lump on his testicle but doesn't want to see his physician until after his holiday in Greece. Rather than attend the doctor's appointment his wife has made for him, he runs some errands, picks up suntan lotion and some T-shirts for the kids at Baby Gap. I'm sure it's nothing, he says. I'll see to it when I get back. Or there's Juliet B., a 36-year-old has been engaged for 7 years to a man who regularly has affairs and visits prostitutes. I can't leave him, she says. Where would I go? What would I do? For Mark A. and Juliet B., the fire alarm is ringing. Both are anxious about their situations. Both want change. If not, why tell a psychoanalyst? But they are standing around waiting. For what?
My name is Perry. I'm 46 years old. I'm a new dad. My daughter is now a year old. People tell you that having a kid is a life-changing experience, and it is. Your life changes utterly, but not in ways I could have ever imagined. I began dating this woman. We'd known each other for many years through friends and didn't really hang out much until early January. And I think within a week or two, we were pregnant. I had finally moved into a place that I really liked. I thought that suited me. It was a loft apartment, lots of space, high ceilings. You know, I work in film production, but I also do a lot of my own art and work with wood and have big projects. And I had built this big work table, and I'd put up this massive movie screen as well. In short, I guess you could say I had a wonderful bachelor apartment, and I was really afraid that I was going to have to either move out of it or change it to such a degree to suit a wife and child that it would essentially be like not living in the place I loved at all. But one of the biggest things I was worried about, there was going to be an enormous amount of intimacy and dependency. I had never lived with a girlfriend before, and this was definitely going to be, instant family, the responsibility of a human life, totally dependent on me, just, because the kid's coming. It's like a train. You're on the tracks, and the train is coming. You're not getting off the tracks. The train is coming. Since then, the things I was worried about turn out to be almost invisible. And the things that I had no idea were coming are the most taxing and the most challenging. And the stuff that keeps me up at night. Worrying if you don't love your child as much as you should. Because I must admit, be honest, and say there are days, you're like, terrible mistake. This was a tragic error. Because as cute as the baby is, she's a giant hole into which you throw all of your awake time and all of your money and all of your care and worry, and you find that it's a bottomless pit. I remember one night specifically, she must have woken up 20 times. And crying. Not just crying, but crying in a way that was like, marauders coming in the night and stabbing you in the ear with machetes. Like so loud I couldn't see straight. But the other night, I was putting her to bed, and she gets cranky when she's tired. And I pick her up, and I put her in my arms, and I hold her close, and I'm not a big guy. I'm like 5'6.5", and I never feel like a big person. But of course she's tiny, and I'm the parent, and I feel enormous. When she holds me, puts her head quietly against my chest as I hold her, and she calms down, and she's getting really close to sleep, I realize that I'm her rock. She needs me so completely. At that moment, I become somebody I never thought I would be, which is everything to somebody else. Does that make sense? And it's at those moments I start to... I weep. I actually cry as I put her to sleep, because I know those are temporal. They won't last. This is all I get. It's funny if you... I haven't stopped to think about this before, but yeah, the thing I guess I was most afraid of, that I would be responsible for another person, be everything to someone, is the thing now that I am utterly abashed by. My daughter's name is Ellie, and she has grown up to be herself. Before there was just an idea. And, you know, when people are pregnant, I think couples, they name the unborn child. And we named our unborn child Jermaine. I don't know why. But you talk about the child within and you call it by this name. And then when the child emerges, the child who had been named is gone. Jermaine ceased to exist the instant I saw Ellie. Didn't know her name yet. But she arrived, and now she is the anchor of our universe. And I'm so thankful that I have an anchor.
Friday, 6:30 a.m. My 80-year-old father and I are heading to New York for a father and son weekend. At my father's insistence, we've shown up to the train station 3 hours early. My father uses the time to check and recheck that his train ticket and passport, both individually sealed in a Ziploc sandwich baggie, have not disappeared. The travel fanny pack in which these items reside is cinched tight enough around his waist to make would-be train bandits think twice, and breathing nearly impossible. I offer to get us some breakfast while my father holds our place in line. An unbuttered roll, he requests, as my mother has decreed butter off limits. As well as a tendency towards high cholesterol, my family's big on routine, and as a result, we never vacationed much. Our last trip together was when I was 10. We went to Los Angeles, where, at Venice Beach, my parents drew a bigger crowd than any of the buskers as they yelled at each other about who had misplaced the camera lens cap. They weren't fighting exactly, just naturally loud, a race of angry giants who'd been shrunk into the bodies of little Jews on vacation. 6:40 a.m. I returned to the train line with my father's unbuttered roll to find him holding his cell phone several inches from his ear as shouting pours out of it. He snaps it shut and reinserts it into his fanny pack. "Your mother's angry because I woke her," he says. "Well, why'd you phone so early?" I ask. "She made me promise I would," he says. 1:25 p.m. As my father doesn't get out much, everything on the train is exceptionally entertaining. A boy in an old-fashioned pork pie hat, a laptop playing a movie with Angelina Jolie. I worry for my father's comfort and safety each step of the journey. He's already hit his head against the luggage rack every bathroom break, 3 times in the past hour, and each time he does, I feel like I'm failing as a son. 2 p.m. When I return from the dining cart with a microwave pizza for us, my father tells me he's been eavesdropping on the lady behind us. He leans in and cups his hand around his mouth. He is affecting the manner of someone who is whispering, though in fact he is yelling. "She sounds like a nice woman," he yells. 3:03 p.m. Throughout the rest of the journey, my father gives updates about the lady behind us. "She once steered a motorboat," he says. 3:07 p.m. "She hates juice with too much pulp." 8:05 p.m. As the train conductor announces Penn Station and we prepare to detrain, my father gets a good look at the woman behind us. She really looks as nice as she sounds, he says. I like when that happens. Sunday, 12:05 p.m. Having already today showered, eaten, and argued over subway directions with great ferocity, one might say we've done it all. And yet, here we are, just after noon, and still not ready for bed just yet. So I suggest a Broadway show. I'll pass, my father says, waving his hand. After a local experimental theater event in the 70s in which an actor in a black unitard leapt into the audience and tried to dance with him, my father has sworn off live theater entirely. So instead, he suggests we go to a bookstore to browse. But that's exactly what you do on a weekend in Montreal, I say. First of all, I don't flush my money down the toilet on bookstores, he says. I'd be at the public library. And second of all, I wouldn't be with my son. And so we head to the Strand, where my father immediately hits the discount book bin and finds a microwave cookbook he wants to buy for my mother. The spine reads, Microwave Cookbook by Kafka. I don't think it's the same Kafka, he says. As he leafs through it, I'm reminded of a rumor a New Yorker friend recently told me about a used bookstore in Manhattan that supposedly had a bedbug problem. Bedbugs nestled between the pages would turn Kafka's The Metamorphosis into a real-life pop-up book. Can an iPad do that? 3 cheers for the good old-fashioned book. My father ends up putting the microwave cookbook back in the bin. Your mother thinks microwaves have rays, he says. I'd better not start. 7:10 p.m. In the East Village, we stop into a rubber stamp store where my father states with uncharacteristic decisiveness that he must have a personal stamp. I can't believe I've lived my whole life until now without one, he says. But you don't have any correspondences, I say. Maybe if I had a personal stamp, that would change, he says. I understand that feeling. Like if you changed one small thing about yourself, everything else would change too. There's a hopefulness to that. And so together we search for a personal stamp. 7:25. I call my father over. I think I found the one, I say. My father is a fan of old horror movies, and the stamp bears the image of the Frankenstein monster, and right beside him is a smaller monster, ostensibly his son. My God, he says, it's perfect. You should probably also buy an ink pad to go with it, I say. My father shakes his head. Your mother will worry I'll get fingerprints all over the curtains, he says. I'd better not start. Monday, 5:30 a.m. I'm online at Penn Station for the 8:30 train back to Montreal. While my father uses the washroom, I hold his fanny pack. I alternate between casually draping it over my shoulder and dangling it at arm's length, trying in vain to determine which is the least uncool way to hold a fanny pack. When it starts to vibrate, unzipping it, I withdraw my father's cell phone, which I then remove from a Ziploc sandwich baggie. It's my mother, and she sounds worried. Your father was supposed to call, she says. It's 5:30 in the morning, I say. He was worried about waking you. Who can sleep, she says. I was too worried about why I wasn't hearing from him. Calming down slightly, she tells me that my father called her the night before to say what a wonderful time he was having. I hope you weren't feeding him garbage, she says. I don't need him living in the bathroom for the next 2 days. My father returns, and as I hand him over the phone, I offer to get us some breakfast. An unbuttered roll, he says, when I ask what he wants. This is Penn Station, I say, New York City. There are dozens of restaurants. You can have anything you want. Why change something that's already perfect, he asks, cupping the phone to his chest to drown out my mother's yelling. Walking away, I realize that I'm still holding my father's fanny pack. And so, like any sane person in need of his hands, I cinch it snugly around my waist and set out in search of unbuttered rolls. Thank you.
On Wiretap today, you heard Perry Grebin and Stephen Gross, author of The Examined Life, How We Lose and Find Ourselves, available through Random House Canada. You also heard a recording of Jonathan Goldstein reading in St. John's, thanks to the Writers Alliance of Newfoundland and Labrador and Jamie Fitzpatrick. At the beginning of today's show, you heard small changes written by our Facebook fans. Thanks to everyone for reading them. Wiretap is produced by Jonathan Goldstein, Mirabert Wintonic, and Crystal Duhame. Subscribe to the free podcast at cbc.ca/wiretap, where you can also download the latest Wiretap ringtone.
A boy in an old-fashioned pork pie hat. A laptop playing a movie with Angelina Jolie.
Let Jonathan Goldstein point out life's small wonders with every ring of your phone.